tell us how you got into advertising?
I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I accidentally became a content creator. I look up and I have like 120,000 combined followers. All of my sponsors are inbound.
Wow.
I've never sent an outbound email to try to recruit a sponsor in my life.
Today on Deepfeed, we are getting to know Jack Appleby, a social and creator consultant with an impressive resume spanning over a decade in advertising, who was eventually able to quit his job to become a full-time creator and build a successful newsletter business. In Jack's career, he has run advertising campaigns for major brands like Beats by Dre, Microsoft, Verizon, and Spotify, and was recently the senior creative strategist at Twitch. He now writes the newsletter Future Social, which was originally launched with the Morning Brew team, but is now run by Jack independently with over 60,000 subscribers. In addition to Future Social, he also runs a newsletter for LinkedIn creators called Break an Egg, alongside entrepreneur and creator Amanda Getz. Jack has a really great perspective on how to leverage social media to build brands and grow companies. Let's get into it. Jack, welcome to Deepfeed.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this because you have over 10 years of experience working on the agency side, with your specializing in content and social primarily, with your last full-time position being the senior creative strategist at Twitch, where you got to work with some amazing brands like the NBA, American Express, DoorDash, Taco Bell. But today you're really busy because you're running the newsletter Future Social. You just launched a whole new newsletter business, and you also reinvigorated your basketball career, which is crazy. So there's a lot to talk about here, but I'd love to kind of start from the beginning. And can you tell us how you got into advertising?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I wanted to do business of some sort, and I knew I liked writing. I was in my high school newspaper. I went into college to pursue a journalism degree. Realized it's basically impossible to make money as a journalist pretty quickly, and just went into business management. And eventually, I should specialize in something. Let's do marketing. And I'm writing for emo music blogs all through college, just because it was an interest of mine, and just kind of was on the internet. And when I left college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. My then partner's sister was I think you'd be pretty good at social media. I was oh, that seems interesting. She got me an interview. 1 week after I left college, had that interview, got the job on the spot, and I ended up working there for 5 years.
Wow.
I ended up working with at that one company, worked with EA Sports and Microsoft and Yahoo and a bunch of big tech launches from my first interview out of college.
Wow. Okay. So can you take us through from being on the agency side and Twitch to today, with Future Social?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so like you said, I worked at agencies for a lot of years for a lot of various tech and entertainment brands. And I'm kind of at that first agency. I was there for 5 years, which no one hangs out that long at the same agency.
Yeah.
But I loved my clients. I worked with my best friends. It was a cool job. I didn't really look for jobs even. I was as happy as could be. But I had this moment where I was kind of panicking. I was oh my God, I don't know anyone in this industry. At some point I should make a connection outside of who's sitting directly to my left and right. So I started just tweeting about advertising. I'd done it for my music blogs for a long time. I was I think if I just kind of share my thoughts online, might make some new industry friends, might meet a future boss, maybe a client or two at some point. And it started to take off. Suddenly it went from 7,000 followers to 15,000 followers to, during the pandemic, 30,000 followers. And then I started posting on LinkedIn as well. And there was no goal in mind other than to just keep finding full-time employments or maybe a consulting client here and there, until it finally got to a cliff where I look up and I have 120,000 combined followers on my social platforms.
Wow.
And Morning Brew had hit me up and said hey, we know that our readers want to know more about social media. We've seen the engagement you get on your content. You're a practitioner. We really want to have someone who's done the work to write about the work. So went over there to form a newsletter with them. And then after our first year, I ended up taking it over independently myself. And I accidentally became a content creator. again, I can't stress that was not the goal. It was just wanted to meet some people, maybe find my next boss. And now my full-time job is writing and consulting.
That's awesome. So when Morning Brew approached you, I'm curious, like, how did they support you, or what was their involvement with getting the newsletter like off the ground?
I had never even considered becoming a writer or like having a newsletter or having like a content stream like that before. And they were wonderful. I've been friends with them for years. They were the ones who really pushed me. They're like, no, you've got something here. Like people want to hear you write more long form content. And then obviously being part of their ecosystem, they're able to push it with like their Marketing Brew newsletter and the daily newsletter as well. They taught me how to be a writer again. I hadn't written long form in 10 years since I was a college journalist. So coming over there, like they showed me how to build something. I built it with them. And then when they like gave me the chance to kind of do it myself, how could I say no? And now it's a fully independent newsletter that I run as a team of one.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, Morning Brew is super cool and still like really awesome to have that backing.
They're the best. Like even though like we're separate entities now, like I still support them. They still support me. I'm doing a speaking event for them coming up. Like they're just good people who like really wanted others to succeed. Like I said, I would have never gone on this journey without them.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I really enjoy about Future Social is how the content is original and it's your take on really breaking down, like going in depth on what makes a piece of content good or how to, or, you know, really going behind the scenes on something. So every time I read one of your newsletters, I feel like I really got a deep takeaway. How are you coming up with these ideas, and like how do you what's the overall strategy of running Future Social?
First off, thank you. It's very nice. Yeah, I mean, again, credit to a guy named Jacob Donnelly, who was my boss at Morning Brew. When we were trying to figure out what to write about for long form, the things he kept pushing me on were like, you've done this before. The industry needs more practitioners to write about how they do things. So me writing news didn't make sense because how can I keep up with the news as a writer of one? It's like, I want you to write about your experience, what you think of what's happening, and like share those original thoughts. So to your question about how I like craft it, a lot of scrolling, a lot of seeing stuff that inspires me out there, a lot of just theorizing about the way I wish the like content worked a little more, a lot of thoughts on like the industry overall, where it's headed, how to advance. But the strategy behind Future Social as a whole is I always want you to have an actionable takeaway. I want you to read it and be able to do something with that information. Because I just don't think there's enough education within our industry. Like we go to college, we learn there, we learn from our direct bosses, and that's as much as we get a lot of the time. So like I really want to help people just understand social more and put that into practice, whether you actually have a social media title or if you're a general marketer who wants to know more about this space.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And that really does come through in the newsletter. So that's really special. I think it's interesting how big newsletters have gotten, you know, with Substack and just like in the industry. And people are saying that it obviously is like the new blogging, but this is a whole new era. And I'm curious, like, why do you think newsletters are so big today?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like we were just talking about education a little bit. I think people are wanting to educate themselves a little more. Like, it seems weird to talk about podcasts in relation to newsletters, but podcasts have become a huge medium, hour-long like podcasts now.
Definitely.
So I think there is just some level of people want long form more than we acknowledge. Like if you work in content, you've heard people for the last 10 years scream 3-second video, 1.5-second video, social hooks up front, like, which is great. And like, yes, the attention spans of people seem to be dropping. But I don't know, like a joke that I make a lot of times, like The Bachelor is 2 hours on TV and people seem to sit through that whole thing.
Yeah.
Like it's more about like, do you have strong ideas? And I think people are learning how to write long form again. I think people are craving like a little more depth in things. Like this is where like Twitter's great, but Twitter's also short form thoughts with no nuance.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing people like have the ability to write with nuance. It's being delivered to you. Like there's such a general fear, I think, of social media algorithms right now, that feeling like I opted into a newsletter that I get to my inbox, you bypass that and you feel a little more in control of what you're reading as well. So I think it's a lot of various things. Like I didn't see it coming, but it's been great, and I certainly learn more this way now.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite podcasts and creators is Colin and Samir.
Of course.
And in one of their recent episodes, they talked about how, their interviews are up to 2 hours now, and their average watch time is high. So it's like, it's interesting. People are saying that attention spans are low, but we're seeing like kind of otherwise in certain areas when there is like a brand built there with trust, and you really like the creator or the expert in that field. Yeah.
I genuinely don't know if I agree that attention spans are low. I think the unspoken thing with a lot of television now, a lot of movies, a lot of social media content is like we have more options for content than we've ever had. And most content isn't necessarily like a blockbuster piece of something that we want to watch or read. It's like the idea, like we're all fighting for the same eyeballs now. Content's got to be really, really good, or at least have like a really, really strong hook to it to entice someone to be part of it.
Yep.
So like, yeah, maybe attention spans are getting shorter, but are the content ideas, is regular season NBA basketball as interesting as it needs to be? Or am I just going to watch a Netflix show that I would rather have, or scroll TikTok because TikTok's amazing at getting me the content that I want?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting. In terms of how you're driving like your subscribers to Future Social, well, first, how many subscribers do you have like today?
About to hit 60,000.
Wow. Yeah. So can you walk us through your strategy for like how you promote the newsletter and how you're actually getting folks to like trust you and sign up and stay, like that retention as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so candidly, like the first half of that came from the Morning Brew ecosystem. Like they did such a good job curating people that want to learn more, marketers, that like we were able to bring in a lot of people from Marketing Brew or Morning Brew over to my newsletter. The rest of it though is pretty much just me putting stuff on my social and encouraging people to follow it. I get a huge portion of my subscribers come from getting featured on lists of people to read.
That's interesting.
I mean, B2B content creators are still a fairly new category. So if you ever see someone asking like, oh, I need resources for marketing, Future Social ends up on those lists a lot of time. Oh, I want to learn more about social media. Future Social ends up on those lists. So I wouldn't say I'm doing anything tricky. I've never spent $1 to promote the thing. It's been all organic.
Yeah.
I'll announce subjects ahead of time. That's probably my other biggest driver. Is like, for instance, I forget if it was this year or last year, when Lyft and Stripe and I forget which other big tech company all had layoffs the same week. I put on my LinkedIn like, hey, I know this is usually about brand social strategy. This week we're going to talk about personal social strategy because I want to help you guys like understand how to use LinkedIn to find jobs. I drove 1,000 subscribers from one LinkedIn post because it was a subject that people needed to hear. It's a piece of like, it's a subject matter that they know like I have some expertise in. It came right over.
Wow. That's really amazing. So do you think that a lot of your subscribers are coming like from LinkedIn? Because you're super active across, like I would say most social platforms, but like particularly LinkedIn?
LinkedIn and Twitter are my quote unquote like marketing platforms. So it's pretty even between those two places. Yeah, for the most part, it's Twitter and LinkedIn for me.
Have you seen a decline in like Twitter users or engagement? Like what's your vibe on what's happening with Twitter right now? Or X,
I refuse to call it that thing. I feel like it changes on a weekly basis. Like my joke is I despise what Elon's done to the platform, but he sure is giving me a lot to write about. When the For You page was initially introduced to, or the For You feed was initially introduced to Twitter, my engagement went through the roof. And I think it's For You pages and interest graph content networks, like those are really good for people who know how to make content. Like you can that's why TikTok creators can blow up so fast. That said, it seems to change every week now. Like I was just telling a friend yesterday, feels like memes and like, for lack of a better phrase, shit posting is doing quite well on Twitter now. And it kind of drives me nuts as someone who primarily uses it to meet people or educate myself. So my stance is if you've got a Twitter audience, like keep hanging out, like see how things go. Mine's pretty up and down right now. And if you're looking for somewhere to start on social media, it's probably the dead last platform I would pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Fully last.
Do not. Yeah, totally. I think having a handle over like LinkedIn for sure before Twitter or even
I mean, if you're a writer, start on LinkedIn, especially if it's about your career. If you have any sense of visuals, whether it's photography or like illustration or video, TikTok or Instagram is gonna be way better for you than Twitter. Like I don't know why anyone would start a Twitter account right now.
Yeah. Well, as you're doing Future Social, but you're also doing like a couple other business endeavors that we'll get to. Yeah. But I'm curious, something I've noticed, you don't have like dedicated social accounts like for each business. Like you're running things through all your one personal. And I think a lot of people struggle with figuring out like how to build that brand and if there should be specific accounts and how to structure that. So what is your thought process behind just, is it for like ease or what's the thinking on that?
It's strategic. It's a choice that I've made for a couple of reasons. Like, I mean, I've even thought about quote unquote renaming Future Social to like Future Social by Jack Appleby, or like even should just operate under my name. But specifically to my newsletter, the reason there aren't social accounts for the newsletter is people read it to read my writing. And I don't want them to be distracted by other platforms when I'm already talking about those same subjects on my personal accounts.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with that, like the other side, is I do have to stay largely on topic. I have to apply personal branding strategy to my Twitter and LinkedIn at all times, which like I really enjoy what I write about. So it's not the most strenuous part of my day to like talk about marketing. But it's, if I talk about things outside of professional like life, they don't perform. It's not why people read my stuff there. So like, it just, Jack Appleby on Twitter and LinkedIn is synonymous with Future Social, and that just drives like a whole ecosystem there. I like, as you mentioned, like I have some other things going on now. Like I'm making basketball content all of a sudden, and that's kind of taken over my personal Instagram, my TikTok, which I'm applying the same strategy there. The downside is I've now found myself without a true personal social media account again, where I can post whatever I want. Because I like in the last 4 months, I added like some like 10 or 15,000 Instagram followers for basketball. And now when I post about emo music or like anything that I'm doing that's not related to basketball, they're like, we don't want this. That's not why we're here. Right. So there's pros and cons to the whole thing. But like overall, I think for creators, as they launch additional products, they're going to those products for you. So unless you're trying to build like a true media company, keep it as your name for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think the only thing I could see is some founders envision selling in the future and wanting, to step back or that company to like keep going. Is that something that you've ever thought about with having your name tied to it?
It's interesting. If I were to ever like join a company again or sell Future Social or my presence, it would be more of a distribution type of model, I think, where I would never sell it in a way to give it up. Now, if you're building an ad agency or like a larger media company with multiple personalities, then like, yeah, you need to have your own brand for that. But like, candidly, I'm not investing in the Future Social brand. I'm investing in myself, and that's just an extension of me right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So something that I've noticed is, of course, you have sponsors in your newsletter, and I'm seeing the same sponsors from your newsletter, like you're doing like Instagram content, mentioning them. I think this is especially relevant for like the creators and influencers listening, but can you kind of talk us through how you get sponsors, what your sponsorship packages look like how you're kind of running that whole process?
Sure. Yeah. I think I'm doing it in the hardest way possible sometimes. Like I always tell my sponsors, like the best and worst thing about working with me is everything's highly custom. That's because people have read me for takes on branded content and influencer campaigns and marketing. So if I'm going to be a content creator, it's really important to me that the creative is extremely good, applicable to my audience, works for the brand, converts to subscribers or purchasers for them. So everything's very custom. Like for instance, I did a partnership with a platform called Impact, where they do a lot of affiliate marketing, a lot of influencer marketing. For them, I did a speaking event. I did my first ever branded newsletter where they took over the entire thing, and I wrote content that was related to their platform. They did Instagram posts with me, and we built this like very custom plan that had lots of pieces to it, and that was a package. Whereas sometimes people come in to just sponsor the newsletter, and like it's funny, the thing that gets me the least excited is someone who just wants to throw an ad in my content. It's like, no, I want to do something like more special with you, more custom, something that I know will drive like real value for your business, which then can also become a case study for me as well.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, to your question about where they come from, like, believe it or not, all of my sponsors are inbound.
Wow.
I've never sent an outbound email to try to recruit a sponsor in my life. I mean, I had the first ever Future Social sponsor, which was a 6-figure sponsor, came from an organic LinkedIn comment where like I had announced, like, we're ready to take some deals now, ready to do some partnerships. I had not known her, but she had read my work for a couple years and had some budgets, and became a 6-figure partnership from organic LinkedIn.
Wow. That's crazy. I think people will be like mind blown for that, because I think a lot of creators feel that you have to have a really good outbound pitch strategy to get sponsors, and it can seem very daunting. So
well, and you should have a strategy. Like, I'm lucky in that I've been doing this for a lot of years before I tried to monetize it. Like, I've probably tweeted / written about this stuff for at least 6 years now, and built a lot of reputation. Like, and I didn't need income from it, so I never even tried like to have income from it.
Yeah.
And then I think something that you can do as a creator is you build a lot of goodwill over the years. And sometimes people aren't willing to ask for help. Like, I put up a very honest post, like, hey, like, I'm taking this thing independent now. Like, this is my revenue stream. Here's what I write about. Here's what you get when you work with me. Who's interested? And got an influx of inbound from that. Like, just asking people for what I needed. And like, I have a very odd business in that I'm a creator who writes about marketing, who works as a marketer, and marketers are who should like work with me. So my quote unquote behind the scenes content is just as relevant as like my everyday content. So it's like that part wasn't by design, but it's worked out to build this incredible flywheel that works well. Yeah.
From the time you launched Future Social, like, how long did that take to get your first sponsor?
It's there's not a good answer for that because we didn't go for sponsors. What I'll say is when I announced that we were taking sponsors, that comment came in within the first day, and we signed with them within the first month for a multi-quarter deal.
Oh, that's great. So when you work with sponsors, typically it's like a long-term relationship?
That's my preference. I've done a handful of one-off stuff. For me, it's about, am I convinced I can be successful for them, that my audience will like be interested in their products? Do I have a creative enough idea that is something I'm proud of? One of my flaws as a businessman probably is the more excited I am by it, the bigger the discount I give, and the more I push it through, whether it makes like the most sense financially or whatever else. Because like I just like making things, and like I enjoy the marketing space. Like I worked with a sponsor. Like I try not to do one-off deals just for sponsorship of the newsletter itself. But a brand came to me called what is their platform called? I don't remember. This is a while back, but they came to me. They're a brand lift platform, and they had the idea of, let's build a white paper on your Twitter account for how hashtag ad versus hashtag partner performs in social content. So I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer for my audience. They're gonna love this thing. I feel like I did like 500,000 impressions on just that piece of content. And I was willing to do a one-off with them because they had a really cool creative idea that made sense for both of us.
Yeah.
So like, I just want to make cool stuff. That's my business model.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, switching gears just a little bit, I am curious because you've worked with agencies with brands via agencies on like really big content series and activations. What are some common threads you've kind of learned over the years when it comes to brands leveraging social to build community and like be authentic on the platform? Authentic being, I know, an annoying buzzword, while also aligning to business goals. Like, were there common threads from over the years that you noticed?
What's funny is like the longer part of me getting out of agency life allowed me to just kind of have some perspective on all the work that I'd done, like what worked, what didn't. One of my like core beliefs at this point, just about social content in general, almost nothing on the best practice scale matters, with the exception of, is the idea truly a great idea? Do you know how to write a hook for that idea that's like very, very compelling, where people can't miss? Whether they see text or an image on the screen, where it's like, I gotta watch or read this thing. And then do those two things tie back to what the actual business does? If you do those three things, you can get almost everything else wrong and still be successful. And that's so much what I push now when I do consulting for brands or for personal brands. Like, how do you build that type of idea? And that's what ultimately builds community and purchase, is like just the amount of interest that you can build for your audience or for your products.
How do you build that idea?
It's a fair question. I mean, there's a couple of ways that I approach this stuff. One of the things I always say for content is like, can you be encyclopedic? Where, what does it look like if we do like the timeline of like the history of an industry, or like what are they? I mean, this is what Mr. Beast does really well, is he takes ideas that are like so bold or grandiose and can turn them into individual videos. So don't get me wrong, the brainstorm process is like the hardest part of this stuff for
Definitely.
sure. But I also think it's where people don't invest nearly enough time. We get like, especially in the social media industry, we get excited about content calendars. We get excited about, we got to put up a piece of content every single day. I would much rather spend twice as long thinking of ideas to try to find that right one and post a couple times a week to take a shot at like going viral within my audience than just constantly like pumping out the same static content.
Yeah. Was there a particular project you've worked on in the past that kind of stood out to you as being a really great idea or that worked particularly well?
It's funny. The very first project that I ever led social strategy for, I still reference 10 years later. And it's not because like we had this like brilliant thing that we were doing. We accidentally kind of discovered in early social what drives a lot of like views and engagements and purchase. Like, so I worked for DC Comics and Warner Brothers Interactive on a video game called Injustice: Gods Among Us. And it's a Superman versus Batman game made by the guys who make Mortal Kombat. It's like a fighter type of game. And we built this campaign, and our whole agency built the campaign, whereas basically pitting DC superheroes against each other in like a March Madness type of bracket. It's like not a crazy idea. Like the concept was called Who Would Win? And my role was on the social side. So like the brand team and our strategy team had built that concept, and my job was to figure out how to like portray that in social media. Every week we would do a character reveal from the roster of players. We would do like Mortal Kombat games are famous for their fatalities, like their final moves. We'd show that footage. We'd show who won the fan votes. And with that, like, that was just content I was excited to make. Like I was probably like 25, just excited to have a social media job. But what I realized we did in the aftermath was we created a series of reveals every single week. So like, oh, this character's in the game. Oh, this is what their final move looks like. Oh, this is what fans think of this. Like, we had real reasons for you to come back to us constantly. And I think that's something that isn't done nearly enough in brand social, is like not just promoting things, but like even artificially creating like these hooks where it's like, I know why I'm coming to this social channel for this brand.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, when we talk about how direct-to-consumer brands like should leverage social going into 2024, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how could a brand like create those hooks? Like, what does that look like? I
mean, it's funny. Like, I've been trying to. I've been doing more consulting and recently because I just miss doing the problem solving of this stuff. And as I talk to social teams about how they approach content, like there's kind of two different lenses that things come through right now for social. Is there's the like really unhinged side where it's let's do anything for views and engagements. Yep. It's either somewhere between 50% or 0% tied to your product. You're just trying to create views that'll somehow translate back, or to the social that I call like responsible social media, where it's very true to the brands, but gets almost no engagement because the ideas aren't compelling. And I've always believed in the middle, like that's where the sweet spot is. Like there's ability to make creative ideas that are not intentionally being crazy or waving your hands just for attention. That are not boring on the feature side there. So when I work with brands, like the really basic first brainstorm question is often, what's the most interesting thing we can do with your product? Which does not sound like rocket science, and it's not, but it gets lost in the briefing process a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like is it going to be interesting if we bring 100 computers somewhere and do something with those computers? Like, should we be gifting your product to 50 people to create a wholesome video? Like I watched Nike just had a great piece of content they did with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's one of their star players now in the NBA. His new signature shoe just came out. There's someone with a camera following him around as he walks around the Milwaukee Bucks practice facility, handing each of his teammates and the Bucks staff their own pair of shoes that just came out for him. That is such easy content that costed the price of those individual shoes at wholesale. That thing has gone super viral within the basketball community because he's just like a nice guy. That's a super easy brief. How do we make this? How do we show off his shoe in a way that's compelling socially?
Yeah. So are you a proponent for like doing these larger let's call them like more stunts or like
Sure.
activations, versus like how can a brand like approach that like on a monthly basis? Like, should they be doing these things multiple times a month, or is it like big
Sure.
things that you ride off of?
I mean, it's tough to generalize that way. Like, do I believe in, for lack of a better phrase, stunts? Yes. I don't think they have to be crazy. I don't think they have to be like hyper scaled. I also believe like you work with what you got. Some content teams don't have amazing video production groups, but they got a lot of writers. So like, what does it look like if you do long form writing? Others are especially good at video. So like, what does it look like if you launch a podcast? I'm nervous to give like a specific, like, here's how to approach brand social.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that's where just what is the most compelling thing you can do with the budget and tool set you have? That's the question you got to continually answer over and over and over again.
Yeah. What are your thoughts right now, like on the influencer landscape and, some brands, like I'm seeing a lot of advice like from other experts in the field, like even like on LinkedIn saying working with smaller creators is better than working with big influencers, or, you shouldn't like just use UGC with like a random person who
Sure.
hasn't used the product. Like, what are your thoughts on just like brands working with creators in general?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the very early days of like the influencer economy or the creator economy. And there's just as many pieces about how micro influencers are amazing as the mega influencers are huge. I've personally worked across the scale. I mean, one of my most successful influencer campaigns was with Dude Perfect. We did a branded video with them that did 80 million views that first year and was the highest driver of downloads for the video game that I was working on. So like, they can be effective at all scales. I think the thing I struggle with when I read like an article about micro influencers versus mega influencers is it's still all about the budget that you've dedicated to these things, because success is based on ROI. So like, yes, I do think micro influencers can be wonderful because their communities are highly engaged. Someone with 20,000 followers, their audience is very invested in who they are. They're usually excited to work with brands a little more. Like, I like working with micros because they throw all of their creative effort into things. And yeah, they're usually a lot cheaper. You can definitely get yourself in trouble with like the mid-size. Like, I definitely see a lot of like, let's call them 50K to, I don't know, 500K type of influencers who price themselves extremely high to where it can be tough sometimes to see if the ROI is going to be there. But I don't want to categorically dismiss. If anything, my only struggle with journalism about influence right now is any type of influencer can be effective if the idea is right and if the budget's right.
So speaking of ROI, how do you think brands can really, what are your favorite tools for measuring that success? And like, what does that tool stack typically look like?
So I'm always very reticent to ever name a specific tool. Because if I'm being honest, I think they're all 80% the same. And I think people develop their own preferences and like just like how they view UIs as they go through their careers. And a lot of times it's whatever you just started with. It's what you end up using for a long time. So I think more interesting than the tool sets itself is understanding what you're measuring for. And I'm always amazed how infrequently I see strong goals, even before we even get to KPIs, just goals and what we're trying to accomplish with influencer marketing. Like, generally it's, of course we want views or we want signups, but I make different, as a creator myself, I make different content depending on what those goals are, and the briefs need to have that. So generally that's what you're looking for, is some mixture of brand awareness, or is it more mid-funnel content, or is it like lower funnel where it's truly about driving clicks and signups? Establish those things and then pick whatever tool sets you feel like actually deliver on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, switching gears a bit, I'm really curious about your new newsletter business, Break an Egg. So what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I mean, so I met this woman named Amanda Getz on Twitter 3 years ago now. We were matched up in a group of marketers that was trying to put together a happy hour. Decided to go grab drinks, not knowing it was the night before quarantine would begin, and became like close personal friends, both of whom had started to kind of speak out loud on the internets about our industries. And we both saw amazing benefits from doing that. And we're probably borderline oversharers. We talk a lot. She's a single mother of 3 who's had this incredible marketing career. I moved to New York, single and not knowing what I was doing, and like had worked a lot, but didn't know how to navigate the industry at that point. And things really worked out for us just by sharing ourselves online. I've always really wanted to give back in a way to like young marketers. Like I had some wonderful bosses who let me figure it out on my own. But we don't get a lot of training as far as how to navigate careers anymore, like what the role of cold applying is within your career track, if it works at all. So what we really wanted to build was a way for people to share their careers and share their thoughts and kind of do what her and I did for all those years, where we weren't trying to be content creators. We just wanted to pair up with people in the industry and meet some clients. I really believe anyone can do that. Like one of my core beliefs is that everyone's got a really interesting story to tell, and most people just need permission to tell that. So what we've launched is we've launched a daily newsletter called Break an Egg, where each morning you get a prompt from us of what you could write about on LinkedIn that day. And they're all intentionally structured in a way to pull out your personal stories. So is it like introduce yourself and some things people that would surprise people about your career? Is it what the most interesting piece of marketing you saw was that made you want to be a marketer? It's all framed around like how to get you to be yourself more. So that comes in every single day. It was really important to me that it was highly affordable. So it's only $5 a month to do that. Like I wanted to be cheaper than a Subway sandwich, cheaper than a streaming service. And we launched it this week, and day one had 750 subscribers. And all morning I've been looking at my phone as people introduce themselves to their like LinkedIn connections about who they are. And I'm watching people who've never known how to write up themselves get that immediate dopamine hit and validation for all of the work that they've done across their career. And it's been really cool to watch.
That's exciting. Even for us as an agency at Posture Media, when we're going to hire freelancers and we're looking, I always look and see if they have posted or what they're posting about too on LinkedIn and also, Instagram and TikTok. And I find myself as someone in a position of hiring, like connecting with people who are showing their personality on social, and not just their work, but even a little bit more. So that's like a really cool thing that you're doing to teach people, not just who want to be full-time creators, but who want to be in the eye to get those gigs and jobs, whether it's full-time or freelance.
100%. I mean, this is where it's funny. At its core, is it a personal branding like opportunity for people? Yes, that's functionally what we're giving them. But I view it as something like much more important, like who we are as professionals. Like people aren't really strong at self-advocating. If you learn to write about yourself, you'll get the practice reps so you can speak about who you are in an interview. If you are interviewing for a job, you get however many interviews they allow you and your resume to show off your work. But if you have content out there, you get way more at-bats and ways to impress people and connect with other people. So it's personal branding, but it's really just increasing the surface area of your luck in an industry, in any industry that's really it's stacked against you in the interview process. And we can help you learn how to speak about yourself more.
Yeah. And I love that it's super affordable too. I'm definitely going to sign up right after this, and because I need it too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's $500, $1,000. And
exactly.
And we may do something that's a little more consulting based in the future. For the first one, like something I've just noticed is how few young professionals have access to tools right now. And I have a real fear with work from home now. young pros don't get to go to an office and shadow bosses anymore. They learn on Slack and Zoom. They get deliverable lists. They learn at their own speed. Everything that I learned is because I like followed around my boss like a little duckling. Like I just absorbed who she was as a human.
Yeah, me too.
And that's how I became a professional. And like that's how I learned the soft skills to sell. Like that's how I learned. I think I'm really good at social media. I think I'm better at selling social media. And that's why I got so much of my stuff made. And that's because I was in an office with my boss. So I have this real fear that young professionals aren't getting that type of experience anymore. And I want to create tools to help them learn how to advocate for themselves and just like understand the industry a little better.
Yeah. With Break an Egg, are you, what's the connection, like opportunity there for subscribers? Is there like a private group that folks can ask you questions in?
Yeah. So, and it's interesting, like for $5 a month, like we wanted to really over deliver for people. So the general business for Break an Egg is each morning you get a prompt, you get an explanation of what that prompt is and why we suggest you do that, as well as 3 social hooks, like ways for you to start your writing about it. And they all have like slightly different lenses to encourage people to be themselves. And the hope is they actually take the prompt and do their own version of social hooks and learn from us slowly how to do that kind of thing. But even in the first, like the pre-launch phase, we realized that the community that we had built around it was just as important. We didn't even have that in the feature list. Like we had a LinkedIn group for people and didn't understand the engagement was going to be so colossal within it. So I had to rewrite like our product language, like, oh, also you get the whole support of everyone. So this morning I watched as 700 people started to craft their personal stories about themselves and then share it with other people in our group. And I watched some people say like, I was terrified writing this thing. I've never written about myself. And then other members were like, you did so great. Like, I'm so excited to learn more about what you do. It's like just the affirmation kind of coming from every angle has been such a part of this. And I think it's going to just continue to fuel itself over and over and over again.
Yeah. How are you balancing like with the other newsletter and then now this new business? Like, what does your time management look like?
Balance? What balance? My time management's poor. It's I'm someone who I love making things. Like I just love creating things, and I like building things that either entertain people or educate people or help people. So much of what I've done this last year is just kind of experiment with stuff, and I've somehow found myself with 3 different businesses now. I have Future Social, which includes like my personal brand. I have Break an Egg with Amanda, which we're going to be really invested in. And then I somehow started playing basketball again for fun, made some content, just like little Casey Neistat style movies around it, just for my own entertainment. And they went viral, and I got invited to this semi-pro professional 3-on-3 community. Now I have my own pro 3-on-3 team that I'm managing that we're going to be touring next year and like want to play not only around the country, but around the globe. So like time management wise, like I'm very hard to get a hold of as a result. And my sponsors can tell you like, yeah, Jack takes a couple days to reply to our emails, and it's not my best like skill. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Do I need to hire help? What do I do? So that's the part that I've not figured out yet, is like the life balance there. But at the same time, everything I'm working on right now is extremely fulfilling to me. So, you give and take a little bit.
Yeah, that's what it's about, I think. As long as you're in love with what you're doing, then, you can like find that drive.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I have a basketball game tonight where before warmups, I will set up a 6-foot tripod with an iPhone 14, and that will film the game for us. And I'll have fun like with my buddies playing ball. And then on the subway ride home, I'll start editing on my phone in CapCut a video that I'll post that might have a sponsor for my team around it that then goes up on my Instagram somehow in the next week. So it's a lot of it's just me, like, I just like making things so much that I don't really know how to stop half the time, I think.
Yeah. Where do all these things fit in, like in terms of, do you have a future vision for yourself, for your career? Like, let's say, where do you see yourself like 10 years from now?
What's funny is I've never been a big vision guy. When I approached this year, like when I knew I was going to take Future Social independence, my line that I was giving people was, well, I can consult, I can do the newsletter, or I can go back to work. And I'm just going to kind of see what feels best, like what I enjoy the most, like where the most money is. And we'll go from there. So I'm pretty day at a time with like life. And I'm kind of now trying to picture what does like my future look like as a marketer or a creator, or like even with this basketball stuff. Like, what does it mean to start functionally a professional basketball team? So like, I'm really trying to think about today and tomorrow, and trusting that I have enough common sense that I'm not going to do something negative that'll affect those things past that.
Yeah, I really like to hear that because I think so many of us fixate on strategy and it leads to paralysis of like, I
Yeah.
can't do this, like because unsure of what our overall strategy is. So,
Yeah, I think most of my businesses are content based. So to me, my time's better spent seeing how strong my content is and then building a business plan when the content's so successful that it justifies being a business. Like I wasn't trying to be a basketball content creator. I went to an event last week that was for content creators, and more people knew me from basketball than marketing, which was insane. I was not expecting that. And like, again, wasn't by design, but the basketball content took off. So now I'm building a business around it, and we'll see where it goes from there. And if it doesn't work, I'll stop doing it and I'll focus on another area. But like, like even when I talk to like young professionals about career pathing, I get a lot of social media managers who tell me they want to be a CMO. I'm like, great. You may not know what a CMO is just yet, and that's okay. You're going to get there. Like, let's focus on getting you the next job. Let's focus on the next title you want, and maybe 2 titles later. Like, 10-year plan, I think it's good for planning, but like that's going to change 10 times in the next year.
yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's the perfect place to stop. Thank you so much. This has been an excellent conversation, and I'm excited to see what you keep doing with all of your endeavors.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been super fun.